So the year is 1978. I'm 17 years old, going to be 18 years old, doing my thing as a sports reporter, a sports stringer. I decided to go out to the Minnesota Twins game. Now you have to understand, in this era, the Minnesota Twins sucked. They were always losing. That's not why I was going out there. I wanted to go on the field before the game, during batting practice, maybe talk to some of the superstars on the opposing teams. So I do that, and things go pretty well. Now I'm going to stay and watch the game. I mean, I got a free pass. Why the fuck not? And when I watch the game, I get the opportunity to sit in the press box. Now, the game sucked. Twins lost. But sitting in that press box was pretty fucking amazing. I got all these old sports writers with 30, 40, 50 years of experience. They're smoking cigars, they're drinking beer, they're eating hot dogs, and they're telling some amazing fucking stories. I mean, Lou Gehrig this, Christy Mathewson that. I learned a lot and was highly entertained. So I always love sitting in the press box. Now, after the game, I walk outside the press box. I'm going to head home. But as soon as I walk out, about 2-3 feet away from me is this older gentleman. Got to be 70 years old, pretty fat, looks kind of grumpy. And I immediately recognize him as Kelvin Griffith. Now, if you don't know, at the time, Kelvin Griffith was the owner of the Minnesota Twins, and he comes from MLB royalty. His father was Clark Griffith, who owned the Senators. When he died, Kelvin took over. He moved the Senators to Minnesota. So he's standing there. I'm 17. I'm pretty cool. And I say, Mr. Griffith, would you mind if I ask you a few questions? Now, Kelvin Griffith looked at me with utter disgust. I mean, it was as if I pulled my pants down and shit on his shoe. He was that disgusted. And he looked at me for a few seconds and he said, we fucking lost. I go, I know you lost, but I'd still like to talk to you. He continued to look at me with disgust. And then he said, follow me, kid. So he takes me down this hall. And I'm thinking to myself, is this guy going to take me in a back room and beat me up? And then I quickly realized he's 70 years old, he's fat, he's not in the best shape. I'm 17 at the peak of my physical fitness, and I'm fucking immortal. So even if he does take me in a back room, I think I can handle him. So we go over to this elevator. We get on the elevator, go up 2 floors in Metropolitan Stadium. Now we get off the elevator, and he takes me in this room, a room I've never seen at the stadium. Holds maybe 10 people. When you go in the room, there's a TV, there's a fireplace, there's a bar, there's a dining table, there's a counter, there's some chafing dishes, there's some like crock pot things, and it's really kind of a nice room. It's very pleasant. He says, come in here. And he says, sit down. So he immediately goes over to the bar and he starts mixing a couple of drinks. And he comes back over to me, he goes, how old are you? I go, I'm going to be 18 in a couple months. He looks at me, he goes, fucking old enough. So he sits down and he puts the drink in front of me. I said, what's that? He says, it's brandy old fashioned. I don't know what the fuck a brandy old fashioned. I'm drinking cheap beer and cheap wine right now at that stage. I said, what's a brandy old fashioned? He looks at me and he says, that's what fucking men drink. Drink the brandy old fashioned. I said, cool. So I'm sitting there, 17 years old, with the owner of the Minnesota Twins, but he's up bopping around. He goes over to these crock pot things. He goes, you ever had beer cheese soup? And I go, no, never heard of it. But I'm thinking to myself, I like beer and I like cheese, so I gotta like this beer cheese soup. He goes, you're gonna love this fucking shit. So he goes to these crock pot type things and he spoons out 2 bowls of beer cheese soup. He sits the beer cheese soup down in front of me. I'm thinking, looks good, looks fucking cheesy. So I grab a spoon and I dip it in. He goes, wait a fucking minute. What are you doing? I said, I'm going to eat the soup. He says, no, you're not going to eat the soup yet. I'm going, what the fuck's going on here? You got to put popcorn in it first. I go, what? Popcorn in soup? He goes, yeah, fucking trust me. And then he points at the bowl in the middle of the table where there's a pile of popcorn. He said, go in there, grab a handful of popcorn, put that shit in the soup, and then you can fucking eat it. So I did it. I grabbed some popcorn, put it in the soup. And I got to tell you, best soup I've ever had. In fact, I still get beer cheese soup every time I go out. And that beer cheese soup was absolutely the best I ever had some 50 years ago. And you know what? Every time I have beer cheese soup, I better have that fucking popcorn, because you need the popcorn in the beer cheese soup. Now we're talking. We never do the interview. Never do the interview. He's telling me stories, kind of like the old sports reporters. He's giving me life lessons. He's like trying to teach me something. And then he gets up and he goes to the chafing dishes. He grabs a couple dishes, and in one he takes out baked potatoes. He puts two, one on each plate. He gets some broccoli, puts that on both plates, and he goes and gets two steaks, like ribeye steaks, nice fucking steaks. And he comes back and he sits down and he puts it in front of us. He looks at me. He says, "You punk kids got to stop eating fast food." I mean, this is a fat guy telling me about health. But he says, "You got to stop eating that fast food. This is how a fucking man eats." And I start looking at it and I go, "That's a fucking good steak. Potato looks good." I go, "I'm not a big fan of the broccoli." And Calvin says to me, "Neither am I. I hate that shit. But my doctor says I have to eat it, so you might as well start fucking now." So I eat the broccoli, the steak, and the potato, the beer cheese soup, of course. And again, we're just sitting there talking. We're just bullshitting. He's telling me stories about yesteryear and all that. He's giving me life lessons of what I should know. We go through the dinner. We finish the dinner, and he wipes his mouth kind of haphazardly. He burps a little bit. He says, "All right, kid, you got to go." I'm thinking I didn't do the interview yet, but at that point I didn't care. He says, "You got to go." So he stands me up, points me toward the door, and as we get to the door, he looks at me and he says, "Hey, kid," he says, "You're a good kid. I like you. You're a good kid." But he says, "If you ever ask me for an interview after we lose, I'm going to fucking knock you out." I'm going, "Okay, cool. I got you. I figured it out. I won't bug you again if we lose." At that point, you have to understand, everybody in this town hated Kelvin Griffith. He was doing dumb and stupid shit. He was doing some racist shit, saying some racist shit. He was cheap as fuck, and the team was losing. Nobody liked this guy. But that moment, that day, to me, he was the coolest motherfucker ever.